Introduction. Way back when this class was just an idea, it was very important to me that it was more than just a Scrum theory class. There are three practices that have consistently helped others understand why Scrum is a worthwhile framework to use. First, explaining the Scrum rules clearly. Second, being as concise as possible in my explanation, but poking fun every now and again, of course. And thirdly, explaining how these Scrum rules can help to make projects a success. The last point, for me, is in some ways the most important reason why I became a Scrum Master and why I felt passionate enough to create this class. I feel that it is important for us to understand what makes each Scrum rule so powerful. That way, we can have confidence that Scrum is not just another marketing stunt, but an easy-to-understand framework for running successful projects. Whether you're a Scrum Master, product owner, team member, business stakeholder, or simply someone who wants to understand what makes Scrum tick, this class is for you. There are two parts to this class. Part 1, an overview and recap of the Scrum rules and practices. Part 2, a more detailed look at the power of Scrum with real-world tips and experiences from blue-chip companies. Every chapterized lesson includes, first, a concise, clear explanation giving you a firm foundation in Scrum. Secondly, nuggets of knowledge based on real industry experience. And thirdly, a brief insight into everyday situations that you won't find in every Scrum class. So, where does this experience come from? Has it been tried and tested? What evidence is there to back up the text? Well, let's kick off a little history of who I am. I write this text as a certified Scrum Master with experience in international blue-chip companies dating back to 1999. That experience includes leading projects for the BBC, General Electric, Oracle, B-Sky-B, Razorfish, and Hit Entertainment, responsible for Bob the Builder and other well-known cartoons. These roles have all involved leadership on a wealth of mobile, internet TV, and web software projects. I have played the role of Scrum Master and in earlier years of team lead and technical lead. I've had the privilege of running projects and rolling out working practices in market-leading organizations from start to finish. My career began before Agile and Scrum methods were widespread in the industry, and this gave me the benefit of leading and working on projects using non-Agile methodologies such as Prince2 and Waterfall. For this reason, I've seen both sides of this story and can give good reasons why I ended up on the Scrum side of it. Having used both Agile and non-Agile variants, I can honestly say that the Scrum framework, when fully understood and used as its creators intended, has been the most successful framework for delivering a quality product. At the same time, it gives ambitious businesses the flexibility to change requirements as needed in this modern world. Based on this experience, rest assured that I appreciate deadlines, requirements challenges, technical complexities, and learning challenges that projects throw up with or without Scrum framework. I also see how this can apply to people at all levels, from the developer to the executive to the average person who has heard about Scrum before and wants to know how it can help them to organize projects. The principles of Scrum are simple to understand, but the real challenge comes when helping others to understand and trust such a simple framework to deliver quality products, maximize return on investment, and still be fun at the same time. Yes, really. So, how can a framework be so simple yet so powerful? How can it save failing projects and carve structure out of chaotic projects, even in complex blue-chip companies? Well, let's get straight into the next chapter and all will become clear. Then you can start to put this knowledge to practice. Enjoy! The birth of Agile. The term Agile is one that is often used and misused in the software development industry. Given that Agile is so closely related to Scrum, let us nail down exactly what Agile means and how it is relevant in context of Scrum. By the end of the 1990s, there was a broad consensus of thought leaders who recognized the shortfalls of waterfall, no pun intended, software development. Many of them founded their own new iterative methods of software development. Iterative development is fundamentally different from waterfall. As opposed to upfront phases with lots of upfront requirements gathering, iterative methods contain many phases of requirements, design, implementation, testing, and delivery within a number of weeks. This allows the business to release a few features early and make some return on investment. They also get to discover potential issues early and change requirements far more often. Working in iterations also allows the project to react to people pinching through periodic replanning. Many of these iterative methods were also lightweight since their founders believed in performing the simplest task possible to solve any given problem. Part 2. Scrum in the Real World. Chapter 3. Kicking off a project. Root cause analysis. So you have just started work for a new client or company and you need to use Scrum to deliver a project. Since Scrum is a framework, implementation of some of its practices tend to vary from company to company. Therefore, whether the company is or isn't using Scrum already, it is often helpful to take note of how the company goes about its daily business before implementing the practices. Are the Scrum rules being followed strictly? If not, is there a common sense reason why not? If there are no common sense reasons, then the first thing to do to establish which practices may be flawed or need improvement. This is called a root cause analysis. Communicating the benefits of Scrum. Before a project kicks off, I recommend asking the question, have the benefits of Scrum been communicated to all involved? At the beginning of a project, we can sometimes wrongly assume that everybody understands what Scrum is and that everybody is focused on delivering its rules. However, there are often individuals within the organization or within the team who, for whatever reason, do not have the belief or understanding of Scrum required to make it successful. To avoid this situation, or simply to make sure that this is not the case, it makes good sense for the Scrum Master to hold a kickoff meeting. One of the purposes of the meeting would be to make sure that everyone involved, definitely the Scrum team, but stakeholders too, if necessary, is clear on how Scrum works and how it will benefit them from their perspective. For example, for the product owner, I recommend explaining the return on investment that will come about from prioritizing the backlog. For team members, I recommend explaining how the framework will help them to work more productively and have fewer interruptions from third parties. For stakeholders, maybe in a separate meeting, I recommend clarifying the product owner's role and explaining the benefit of the shippable increment of the product. I would also emphasize the way the sprint review allows stakeholders to feedback into the process and to add value to their product. Kickoff meeting and definition of done. If you are a Scrum Master taking over a project, it is recommended to ask the team if there are any key issues that they would like to raise based upon their experience from previous projects. This may give some early insights to improving productivity and help start on the right foot. This is a form of retrospective, and although retrospectives are held at the end of every sprint, I suggest capturing the main issues based on prior knowledge. The purpose of this is to allow the team to communicate any suggestions or anxieties that may have built up from previous projects. This is particularly relevant going into new project, especially if you are a new Scrum Master. Secondly, it gives everyone a very quick insight into some of the issues faced on the project. A Scrum Master can set about removing any impediments even before the first sprint is underway. Before project kicks off, the team should agree on the definition of done. This definition will apply to every sprint and will be used to decide whether the product increment meets the level of quality that the team experts are satisfied with. Done means that the product increment is potentially shippable. By getting the team to decide this, I have observed each expert adding his or her own seal of approval. For example, in software project, testers may want unit and acceptance test automation. Developers may want every task and defect complete. User experience specialists may want some user testing done, or at least sign off by a specialist. The Scrum Master should coach here to make sure the team understands that the outcome is potentially shippable product increment. Improving practices. The object in root cause analysis is to ask, what problems does the team have with the project delivery? Or, where are the impediments in the project? For example, in some cases, communication is a problem. In other teams, there are far too many defects in the product they have delivered, and yet other teams, there are people not fulfilling their roles or not fully understanding them. It is very important to establish where these problems are so they can be solved within the remit of Scrum. The common way to set about solving this is to ask, which Scrum practices can be enhanced or added to aid delivery of the project? For example, if the problem is communication, ask, is the stand-up or any other time boxes being run effectively? I recommend making sure that any issues raised at the daily Scrum are dealt with in some way directly after the meeting. Do not get me wrong, this does not mean that you can solve the issue on the spot, but you can at least start the process of solving it and make sure it is not forgotten. If everything else has been explored, maybe some kind of a routine meeting, email, or other form of message delivery that everybody can see and absorb is the answer. The importance of good initiation. In summary, the beginning stage of a project is an important time to make sure that everyone understands Scrum, its benefits, and what constitutes the shippable increment of a product. As usual, getting the fundamentals right means that the team is surely on the road to success. Chapter 4. Establishing Stakeholders. So, first of all, what are stakeholders? Stakeholders are individuals who are outside of the Scrum team and yet have a vested interest in the outcome of the project. They're usually investors in the project, sometimes in terms of money, but usually in terms of time. Usually the outcome of the project directly affects their career in some way. Examples of stakeholders. A product manager usually plays the role of a product owner, so in that instance is not a stakeholder strictly speaking, since he or she has a role in the Scrum team. However, the senior product manager is an example of a stakeholder, having a vested interest in the outcome of the project. A head of department who is actually responsible for the success or failure of the department's project is a stakeholder, since the success of the department is directly related to the quality of the finished product. Directors on the non-executive board stand to see their shareholders profit from the product and have a vested interest in it. Other examples of stakeholders are marketing managers, support team managers, and legal representatives. The product owner should be familiar with the stakeholders, since he needs to interface with them in order to make sure the requirements are in line with the business. The importance of stakeholders at sprint review. In my experience, the presence of stakeholders at the sprint review has been invaluable. Very often, issues and matters crucial to the finished product come to light early in the process instead of at the end of a release. Scrum is a huge advocate of the Agile principle of communication between the customers and the team. Therefore, the sprint review exists to make this a reality and increase return on investment. I advise Scrum Masters and product owners to work as closely as possible with stakeholders to emphasize the importance of sprint review, since the results of doing so will be positively evident in the finished product. Chapter 5. The Scrum Roles. As mentioned previously, there are only 3 roles in a Scrum team. The power of this trilogy is that as long as each role is fulfilled, we end up with a product that is delivered on time or to scope for scope-driven projects and to a high degree of quality. We also maximize the return on investment, ROI, since it can often be a challenging task to get each role to reach their full potential and roles need to be established early on. Let us examine the characteristics and values of each role. Characteristics of a Scrum Master. A Scrum Master should understand the rules of Scrum to an expert level. This means that anyone in the organization and any stakeholder should be able to rely on the Scrum Master for advice on the framework. It requires the ability to coach, mentor, and build relationships with people at all levels of business. The role often requires a great deal of confidence and strength. This is because others may not share the experiences or beliefs of the Scrum Master, and therefore they must often be convinced that Scrum's practices will solve their issues. This is why influence, persuasion, and leading by example are such important traits for Scrum Masters. A Scrum Master is a coach to the Scrum team, and therefore strong interpersonal skills are necessary. The team should feel comfortable explaining any issues, and the Scrum Master should be happy to help even on the busiest days. A Scrum Master's relationship with the product owner is just as important as the relationship with the team. The ability to understand how to assist, motivate, and coach the product owner can turn projects around. For this reason, a Scrum Master will need to understand the personal characteristics of the product owner as well as what Scrum requires of him. A traditional project manager often performs a role of Scrum Master. This can have both pros and cons. A Scrum Master manages the framework without managing the people. However, traditional project managers may be from the command and control background, which is averse to the belief in self-organizing teams. Therefore, I suggest that any candidate Scrum Master should be ready to embrace and see the value in this new way of thinking. To be fair, many of the best non-Scrum project managers I have worked with made their name by empowering teams of experts to make decisions and knowing how to manage the process. Good traditional project managers usually have the key interpersonal and process management skills that all projects can benefit from. Prior technical or product domain experience is a strong plus in the role of a Scrum Master, since there are often situations that require you to emphasize with the team and to help them to solve problems. For example, experience in solving common problems such as setting up databases, breaking down large problems into small ones, or just plain keeping solutions simple in the first place. This experience also helps the team, since the Scrum Master can often explain technical issues to the product owner and stakeholders without involving the team, hence leaving them to get on with the work. Characteristics of a product owner. A product owner understands the vision of the business and wants to realize that vision into a real living, breathing product. Product owners are typically product managers used to managing the life cycle of one or more products. He or she is interested in getting as much value as possible from the team in order to deliver as many features as possible as quickly as possible. This often needs to be tempered with an understanding that the simplicity of the process will make the increase in value more likely. In my experience, the difference in characteristics between teams and product owners can cause heated debates where the team are concerned with building the most excellent product possible, even if it takes more time, and the product owner is concerned with building the most excellent product possible in the shortest time possible. Neither of them are wrong in their points of view, but There are often bouts of tension between the two concerns. The Scrum Master can play a pivotal role here, holding the balance, explaining the points of view of each role, and highlighting the shared goal. The idea of maintaining a product backlog, attending Scrum time boxes, and constant communication with the development team is likely to be new to most first-time product owners. It is often for the Scrum Master to coach a product owner on the benefits of framework and to help make their job as straightforward as possible. In my experience, the ability to explain how a prioritized backlog results in increased return on investment and how sprints result in a quicker return on investment are two examples of benefits that a product owner will appreciate. The product owner will need to spend time dealing with various business stakeholders, all of whom have a vested interest in the product. As the product owner has to make a final decision, this role also requires a lot of strength and confidence. Saying yes to one stakeholder can often mean saying no to another. Therefore, a certain degree of diplomacy is necessary. This is something a Scrum Master will assist with when deemed necessary or called upon. From my perspective, the key factor holding back a potentially excellent product owner is the lack of time or reluctance to maintain the backlog. The former reason should be addressed as much as possible through finding time in the product owner's schedule and emphasizing to the business how much time is needed to ensure a quality product. Again, the Scrum Master can be that added support in these situations. As for the latter reason, only a product owner can solve the reluctance, but a Scrum Master may need to motivate and coach where necessary. I have observed that any product owner who fully understands their role in Scrum, maintains the backlog, uses the power of prioritization, and works with the team to get the best product possible, multiplies the productivity of the team many times in comparison to a product owner that does not. Therefore, the importance of this role should never be underestimated and should always be appreciated. Characteristics of a development team. As we know, Scrum development teams are cross-functional. However, the makeup of a team is dependent on the product. For example, a mobile app, such as that found on an iPad or mobile phone, will require developers, designers, and user experience specialists with expert knowledge in that field. A hardware project to build or research set-top boxes would need hardware specialists, architects, and designers more applicable to that domain. Deciding the makeup of a team is usually a task for the technology department in conjunction with the product owner and Scrum Master. Since Scrum Masters are usually from a technical background, they are often advisors on the makeup of the team. They should always be consulted about the size of the team in order to advise on the practicality of applying it to a Scrum project. See explanation below regarding team size. I strongly recommend that whenever possible, Scrum development team members are interviewed for their enthusiasm and suitability for a Scrum environment. This is a good move in order to help ensure that the team are open to new ways of thinking or are already Scrum-oriented. In my experience, simply quizzing a potential team member's attitude to iterational planning, daily Scrum meetings, and self-organizing is a necessary step even at the interview stage. It can help judge the suitability of the candidate, making them aware of the environment they are joining and positively influencing them before they start on the project. Once a team has been brought together, they will quickly need to agree on the definition of done. Scrum relies on the team as a number of experts well qualified to decide when a feature is done. The power lies not only in their expertise, but in the mix of skills and perspectives. Testers are almost certain to want the software to be well unit and acceptance tested. Developers are almost certainly going to want every single task completed. User experience specialists are nearly always going to want some user testing, etc. This has the effect of a certain level of quality at the end of each sprint. I mentioned this to emphasize that Scrum teams should be made up of domain experts. As long as this is the case, the team can be trusted to make judgments that lead to quality. This is not to say that every team member should have, say, 10 years of experience, since this is a judgment for the team leads who employ them. Once employed, there's still often a degree of encouragement needed by the Scrum Master to make sure that the team are coached and thinking along the lines of what makes a product shippable. Teams will often want to get information about exactly what they need to build as concisely as possible. They're often very logical in their approach to solving problems, which is what makes them good at what they do. A product owner can get the best out of a team by writing clear, concise acceptance criteria and user stories that explain exactly what is required. Scrum Masters can assist by coaching product owners on how best to relay information to the team. Scrum teams should be lean, mean, productive machines. As mentioned previously, the ideal size of a team is 7 plus or minus 2, between 5 and 9. This cannot be emphasized enough. Having a team that is too large will make planning very difficult and cause frustration. Scrum meetings will end up either with too many people trying to communicate at the same time or with the need to remove people from meetings to keep them on track. For a software project, it also often means that too many people are attempting to work on the same code base. For the non-technical reader, imagine 20 cooks trying to cook a broth at the same time, and hopefully it will paint the picture for you. In short, large teams are not conducive to good communication. Therefore, teams should be optimized as much as possible. Note: teams can also be divided and coordinated with regular Scrum of Scrums meetings, but that is outside the scope of this class. If the desire is for the split team to work in the same code base, technical teams need to advise on how feasible this is. The value of Scrum values. If we do the things we've always done, we will get the results we've always got. Scrum is about continuous improvement and adapting, which can be a new way of thinking for many people. I wrote this chapter to emphasize how this way of thinking applies to each role in terms of character. I can confidently say that the greatest benefit comes to projects in which each role understands their value in this new way of thinking and sees how smoothly a project can run once the thinking is applied. Chapter 6. Building the Product Backlog. Even before the roles are filled or time boxes are arranged, the product owner will need to build a product backlog with the business's desired feature set. Kicking off a project without a project backlog is like setting it up for a fall. It usually results in forcing a team to generate work for themselves while the backlog is built. On top of that, it leaves them without clear priorities for a period of time. Obviously, neither of these are useful ways to put a team of experts to good use. Many product owners know this straight away, but the Scrum Master may need to coach some on the importance and urgency of this. As previously mentioned, a product backlog is nothing more than a list of the features that the product owner desires for the final product. This, of course, is based on the business's requirement. Ideally, the product owner will build a list compiled of user stories, explained later in this class. This list should be finished and presented to the team, ready for estimation. This is not always done as urgently as needed. Usually, either a product owner's busy schedule, lack of understanding, need for more coaching, or a mixture of all cases can delay the timely delivery of a product backlog. Therefore, I will explain what I have observed in the industry most frequently. I will also explain my personal approach to dealing with these situations. If the product owner can manage and create the backlog in a timely fashion, then some of the Scrum Master-related preparation will not be necessary. First, let us explore the basic elements of a product backlog. User story and acceptance criteria. User story writing is a topic unto itself, but since it is a usual part of creating a product backlog, I will introduce the key concepts. User stories, the 3 R's. Although not a Scrum artifact strictly speaking, in industry each product backlog requirement is usually maintained in the form of a user story. A user story is a description of a requirement from a user's point of view. The idea is that delivering value to the user will result in high return on investment, and a great product. Therefore, a user story helps to give the whole Scrum team the correct focus. User stories are usually written on 3 by 5-inch cards, small enough to carry and pass around the team, but large enough to write a description and acceptance criteria on. User stories typically use the following convention. As a role, I want requirement, so that reason, that is, return on investment. I call this the 3 R's of story card writing. The role focuses everyone on what type of user the feature is aimed at. The requirement explains what the user should be able to do. The reason, ROI, explains what the value is to the user and therefore to the business. This third point is often overlooked, but in my experience it can add tremendous value and help the product owner to avoid adding useless features from a user's point of view to the backlog. If there are cases where the story description speaks for itself in the first 2 points, then the third can be omitted. If we're building a mobile Formula One game, an example of a user story would be, as an F1 game player, I want to see a circuit map so that I know where I am on the circuit. Acceptance criteria. The purpose of acceptance criteria is to articulate precisely when the user story is done from the product owner's perspective. They should translate into acceptance tests that a tester or quality assurance tester can use to verify the quality of a feature. A tester should be involved in writing them, but it is a product owner's responsibility to produce them. Agile business analysts are very helpful in assisting product owners and extracting the right information for user stories. The template I use for writing acceptance criteria is: a role should see or be able to do the following. Acceptance criteria 1, 2, 3, etc. Edge cases. Edge cases 1, 2, 3, etc. This is a simple bullet-pointed list of criteria. It's nothing complex and neither should it be. All that is needed is a set of logical criteria that can be used for tests. Also note that edge cases are separated out. This is not a necessity, but in my experience, it helps to force thinking of tricky situations that may arise. An example of writing acceptance criteria using this template is: an F1 game player should see a track that, as closely as possible, resembles the shape of the F1 track in the game, consists of a graphical circuit line that fits within a 3 by 5 proportioned box, has a small dot to represent the game player's car. The dot should move in relation to and in proportion to the game player's position on the track. Edge cases. If the car blows up, the dot should turn red for 1 second, then disappear. Based on these tests, designs, and an actual implementation of a circuit map can be made. Please note that the stories above assume that the designers and user interface designers will work with the team to fine-tune exact positioning, look, and feel. In the real world, teams will likely ask for clarification and some more detail where necessary. I suggest that the product owners use this as a chance to maximize the value of process by fine-tuning the criteria to the level that the team needs. Organizing stakeholder meetings. Product owners may be in need of assistance to build the backlog, and it is a Scrum Master's role to help them achieve this if there are impediments. If the impediment is lack of timely stakeholder input, the product owner will need to ask the stakeholders for such input. Where this is becoming an issue, the Scrum Master may need to arrange and facilitate routine meetings to prompt communication and aid requirements gathering. Stakeholder meetings are held when we have a number of stakeholders with a vested interest in the product who also have conflicting or related views on the requirements. The Scrum Master may organize the meeting to debate the requirements, and the product owner will make the final decision as to which features make it into the product backlog. This can prove tough in reality since the stakeholders can consist of heads of department, product vendors, creative directors, and other people with different but equally important perspectives. To be clear, the Scrum Master is not required to organize these time boxes unless it will solve an impediment for the Scrum team. However, in reality, the constraint of time often requires things to work this way. Finding common ground. In a Scrum Master-led stakeholder meeting, the Scrum Master will need to exercise the skill of time boxing and often negotiation or persuasion. This is usually to make sure that everybody gets an equal chance to put their points across and that the meeting stays focused. For example, where product designs are concerned, different stakeholders may have different ideas and different reasons why the product should be visualized in a specific way. Ultimately, it is part of the product owner's role to listen to each point, put forward his or her own point, and finally make a decision. In the heat of the debate, meetings can often overrun and tempers can sometimes flare. A Scrum Master can be impartial voice of reason in these situations. In short, debate is always healthy, but the outcome of the meeting should be a product owner decision on specific features within product backlog. Managing changing requirements. Ultimately, it is the product owner's role to manage changing requirements in the process. This means that once a backlog is established, there will usually be ongoing maintenance, additions, deletions that need to be carried out. If these do not happen in time for the sprint planning sessions, the Scrum Master will need to step in to assist. This is because Scrum actually manages changing requirements in terms of sprints. The team need a number of user stories to be ready for them to work on before the sprint begins. Therefore, a Scrum Master needs to make sure that the process is working for it to be effective. He may need to arrange necessary meetings, as previously mentioned, to make sure that the right people are in the right place at the right time to get final decisions made. Alternatively, he may need to arrange meetings directly with the product owner, such as a pre-planning meeting to prepare for the upcoming sprint. Prioritization. Prioritizing involves using the value of a feature, business value or return on investment, to decide where its user story sits in the backlog. Stories that are more valuable sit at the top and stories that are less valuable sit at the bottom. The product owner will need to decide what value means for the product. That is it revenue, user likability, sales in the first month, magazine ratings, or all of the above? From experience, the priority is a mixture of all of the above. However, since all products have a user, the user experience benefit usually dictates the story's value. Many product owners will already know this, but the Scrum Master can assist product owners who are new to this concept in understanding and realizing the value of prioritization. With paper story cards, ordering the stack is, of course, enough to show priority. However, there are a number of software tools that allow us to create virtual stories. With software story cards, I recommend using drag and drop, or if that is unavailable, a relative scale. Usually 1 to 50 is enough, but even 1 to 100 works for huge backlogs. The highest priority item can be numbered 100 and the lowest 1, for example. It does not matter as long as the product owner can quickly and easily change the priority of any item in the backlog to give it a visual order. The highest value items can then be picked up for the oncoming sprint. Capturing stories in meetings. Whether acquired through meetings or otherwise, the end game is a product backlog composed of user stories. Therefore, I recommend that a product owner is prepared with 3 to 5 story cards, as described in this class, or access to any story card capturing software at all requirements gathering meetings to be most efficient. That way, requirements make it directly into the backlog. The responsibility to manage the backlog lies with the product owner. The Scrum Master is, of course, around to coach, facilitate, and remove any impediments to backlog management as needed. Sprint planning meeting. Once the product backlog is detailed enough and we are sure that it is ready to present to the team, we are ready to begin the planning process. There are two halves to a sprint planning meeting. In the first half, the team decide what they aim to do, and in the second half, they decide how they aim to do it. The meeting must end with a commitment from the team to deliver the sprint on time. Artifacts needed for planning. The minimum artifacts needed for the planning meeting are the sprint backlog items, usually user stories, and the tools of estimation, usually Agile Planner poker cards. This is not prescribed in Scrum but is recommended as it is an Agile industry standard. It also often helps to have links to or printouts of any supporting design ideas or documents and extra blank story cards. Sprint Goal. The Scrum Guide states that the sprint goal is crafted from the items in the sprint backlog once they have been selected. It gives the team wiggle room if they run into any unforeseen problems completing the work while still meeting the overall vision of the product owner. I have mentioned this upfront because in my experience it also helps focus the team to have the product owner describe upfront what he would like to achieve by the end of the sprint. This does not force the team to commit to it, but it does help them to move in the right direction. For example, the product owner may state, "This sprint, I would ideally like us to have a Formula One game that displays some live match stats as well as a circuit map." This does not specify exactly how many live stats will be available or to what level of detail the circuit map will be developed. It may even be too much for the team, but it gives a clear direction that most teams appreciate. First half of the meeting. The what. One by one, the product owner talks through the items in the proposed sprint backlog. She reads the acceptance criteria, explains any detail, and the team asks questions. The aim of the game is for the team to get enough information about the proposed sprint backlog that they can work out what they can commit to. Therefore, the team asks questions of the product owner in order to feel confident of the requirements and purpose of each product feature. I strongly suggest reading the stories in priority order to maximize time and value. Once the team have understood enough about the backlog items, they will choose a number of items that they aim to complete in the sprint. From my experience in some teams, the second half of the meeting usually gives them more detail on which they feel more comfortable to make a commitment. The Scrum Guide agrees that the team may have to renegotiate what they can commit to in the second half of the meeting. Estimating user stories. As discussed, user stories are the most common artifact used to represent the features that the product owner would like delivered. If there are any stories in the backlog that have not been estimated before, the team will usually do this during the first half of the planning meeting to help guide on the amount of effort needed to deliver the sprint. Typically, the unit of estimate for stories is story points. One by one, the team estimate user stories. They agree the estimate which is written on the story card. The method used for estimating is usually planning poker. This is beyond the scope of this class, but in short, number one, the product owner reads the story card. The team discussed what work is necessary at a high level. Third, on the count of three, all team members vote using planning poker cards, Fibonacci numbers. Number four, the two team members with the greatest difference in estimates talk it out and explain why they think the work is more or less than their colleague. Number five, the team return to point three until there's a consensus. Usually a couple of turns is enough. Number six, the agreed estimate is written on the story card. Number seven, the product owner picks the story card and returns to step one until all story cards have estimates on them. Second half of meeting, the how. Once a subset of items have been chosen by the team and all have story point estimates, they can proceed to plan out how they deliver the sprint. Typically, this is done by creating a task breakdown. The team break each story down into subtasks, of the day or less in work. This makes it easy to see daily progress and have small targets. The team would typically estimate each subtask in a number of hours. Estimates on these subtasks are helpful because when they start work, they can very quickly see how much time it will take them and can readjust their plans accordingly. They can then make decisions that help them to meet daily targets. From my experience, it's very important for the product owner, scrum master, and team to be together in this half of meeting as well as the first half so the team can have questions answered quickly. In addition, the product owner will need to make trade-offs whenever the team reach their limit of work. For example, at times this limit may be half the effort of a user story. The product owner can decide whether to split stories or simply pick another smaller one. This can often be a key product decision, especially in the later sprints. Once the task breakdown is complete, the team finalizes their commitment to deliver the sprint. Considering velocity. Once a team have set a pace at which they work, velocity, they can equate story points to a period of time. For example, they may work an average of 42 points per week. This also tells them that they can take on 2 21-point stories or 2 13-point stories and 2 8-point stories in a sprint. If there are 5 sprints in a release, it tells them that they could take on about 210 story points by the end of the final sprint. The velocity should be reviewed after every sprint. The outcome of sprint planning. After sprint planning, the team should leave with certainty on what they are building, how they plan to build it, and commitment on delivering it by the end of a sprint. The product owner should be satisfied that a sprint goal has been agreed. The team will usually have a discussion between themselves about whether they can commit to delivering the feature set proposed by the product owner, and the outcome of the sprint planning meeting should be a team commitment to deliver a number of stories from the product backlog. The combination of stories and subtasks, all estimated, is known as the sprint backlog, and these form the work that the team will do in the sprint. Chapter 8. Release Planning. The purpose of the release plan is to give the Scrum team a reasonable forecast of the number of features, scope, that are likely to be delivered within a specific time frame. The time frame may be of less importance if the release is scope-driven, as explained below. The release plan focuses the whole Scrum team on the end game and vision of the product owner. This usually spurs on a highly motivated development team and brings any issues to the surface as early as possible. It is important to understand that although release planning is commonly used on projects and was advocated in the original Scrum Guide, it is not essential for all Scrum projects. In my opinion, for software projects, a release plan is nearly always worth doing since it binds the whole team and provides forecast for the whole organization. Setting a release goal. Though not a requirement of Scrum, as a principle, I recommend starting every release with a release goal. This is a brief, high-level description of the features in a product release. An example of a release goal would be: the Acme Sports site is a sports website with stats for football, rugby, golf, tennis, and F1. The site also should contain Twitter updates from the top celebrities in each sport. Notice that this has not gone into excruciating detail of the specific features in the backlog, but is enough of an overview to create a vision that the whole team can comprehend and ask questions about. I recommend a few sentences or bullet points to keep it short and sweet. This goal can be used to determine a minimum acceptable feature set for launch when necessary. Scope-driven versus date-driven release. A release plan is usually either scope-driven or date-driven. The key drivers for a date-driven release are usually marketing factors such as a sporting event, peak shopping season, or national holiday. The chosen date is usually related to a source of revenue for the business. The key driver for a scope-driven release is a specific set of valuable features. For example, an F1 game may be of little value to the user without driver selection, circuit selection, race sequences, and dynamic circuit map. However, it may be of little revenue for the business without some advertising built into the software. Therefore, the in-game features plus advertising may be defined as a minimum scope for an acceptable release and deemed more important than any date. Once the team is fully resourced, it is obvious that the more features we add, the longer the product is likely to take to release. Similarly, the closer we bring the date, the less features we are likely to build before launch. For this common sense reason, either the date or scope can be fixed, but not both. This is to say that a project should be either date-driven or scope-driven. It is also important to realize that attempting to add features or bring forward the date without updating the plan is likely to reduce the quality of the product, since we end up trying to achieve the impossible and cause the same last-minute scramble that Scrum was designed to avoid. This is often something that a Scrum Master needs to communicate to stakeholders and a product owner, if not already understood. In any case, a release plan allows sensible planning on a sprint-by-sprint basis. So long as the plan is followed, the project should be plain sailing. Prioritize items for release. In order to plan a release, the product owner should have a prioritized backlog. The benefit of prioritization is realized in release planning and sprint planning. If the most important features are at the top of the backlog, then the business is more likely to have a successful product release by the release date. Logically speaking, as soon as you develop your most important features, then you're in a better position for an ROI point of view. This relates to the old 80-20 rule, Pareto's principle. It states that 20% of the work we do delivers 80% of the value. This is a very important rule because in backlog terms it means that the top percentage of a prioritized backlog is likely to deliver the vast majority of the product value. This alone shows why early prioritization is key to a successful release plan. Average velocity and the number of sprints. As mentioned previously, velocity is the rate at which teams work in a given sprint. Average velocity is a mean of 2 or more sprint velocities. For example, a team may work at the rate of 42 points per sprint. Once the team have worked for 3 or 4 sprints, the average velocity can be calculated by dividing the total number of story points completed by the number of sprints taken to complete them. For example, if a team have completed 4 sprints so far, and their velocity at the end of each sprint is as follows: Sprint 1, 10, Sprint 2, 13, Sprint 3, 45, Sprint 4, 48, the average velocity is 10 plus 13 plus 45 plus 48 divided by 4 equal 29 points per sprint. This statistic can be used to forecast how many features are likely to be completed by a release date for date-driven projects, or how long a number of features are likely to take for scope-driven projects. That is, if there are 7 sprints left in the release, then the forecast number of points is 7 times 29 equal 203 points. For a date-driven project, we can pick 203 points worth of stories for the release backlog. For a scope-driven project, we can work out that if the desired scope is 290 points, it will take approximately 290 divided by 29, which equals 10 sprints to deliver. This is a valuable indicator for the Scrum team as well as the whole business. When release planning, it is important to remember 2 things. First, this is an indicator. It is not a team commitment, especially since the velocity can go up or down based on performance, the number of impediments, people pinching, unforeseen defects, and lots of other fun stuff. Secondly, The plan must be updated every sprint to give the business an up-to-date forecast. In my experience, the release plan becomes far more reliable as more sprints are carried out. In addition, the earlier sprints usually encounter more teething problems than others, which reduces early velocity. Release planning and meeting and release backlog. The purpose of the release planning meeting is for the whole Scrum team to agree what they feel is achievable either by the release date or for the release scope. Usually, the Scrum Master or Product Owner will discuss the velocity, number of sprints left, and ultimate release goal with the team. This gives the team an opportunity to advise the Product Owner on any key features, technical or otherwise, left out of the plan, and understand what the aim is. The Product Owner can then communicate to the business knowing that all has been taken into account. There may be some slight or even drastic changes to the plan because of team vacation plans, new ideas, or new information that arises from this meeting. The outcome of the meeting should be that a release backlog that the whole team are focused on delivering is created, and the whole Scrum team should leave with a sense of clarity. Release burndown. Once a plan is made, the release burndown can be used to track release plan progress. The release burndown works on exactly the same principle as the sprint burndown, but, believe it or not, the release burndown is showing the progress in the release as opposed to the sprint. On the y-axis, we are showing the number of story points remaining in the release. On the x-axis, we are showing the number of sprints remaining in the release. As work is completed from sprint to sprint, story points are reduced or burned down. For example, as shown, 400 story points existed at the beginning of the release. In sprint, one of the team managed to complete 30 or so story points. At the end of sprint 2, the remaining story points reduced only slightly more, usually indicating a less than productive sprint, but as mentioned, early sprints are unpredictable. Over time, we can use this to tell us if we're on track for a given release date. For scope-driven projects, this can be used to tell the product owner whether the release is on track to go live on time. I've used the remaining number of story points and average velocity to communicate progress more than a release burndown. Although I think doing that was a worthwhile practice, I have learned that it should never replace such a simpler, clear method of showing progress as the release burndown. I highly recommend using the burndown as a straightforward snapshot of project progress. Chapter 9, The Sprint Life Cycle. The Sprint. As discussed, a sprint is a time box period in which the team build an increment of the product. The sprint is one of the key focuses of a Scrum project in so many ways. Good Scrum Masters and product owners will realize this and do everything they can to help a development team meet their objectives. A good team will pull out stops to meet their commitments. Let us explore the various aspects of a sprint. Sprint length. The sprint length needs to be decided up front in a project since it should ideally be maintained for the whole release. The Scrum Guide says the sprint lasts a period less than 30 days. The length of a sprint should be determined in consultation with the team. Two questions I ask to make sure that the sprint length is adequate are: how can we maximize the number of opportunities to inspect and adapt? For example, in a 3-month release cycle of 1-month sprints, there are only 2 opportunities to improve decisions or change the backlog. 2-week sprints would give you 4 opportunities. How long on average does it take for the team to build momentum in a sprint? For example, if it takes a matter of days for them to get into the swing of things, then 1-week sprint is usually not enough time to deliver an increment. However, if they can pretty much hit the ground running and have the very small stories to deliver, then 1-week sprints may be an option. On software development projects, I have found that 1-week sprints do not give an average-sized team the time to build momentum as well as deliver on time. I have found that 1 month sprints only tend to work in somewhat unorthodox projects and for teams who have a new technology to master or complex third-party dependencies to learn about. The full month usually gives them more time to liaise with dependencies and still get the job done. 2 week sprints tend to be long enough for teams to build momentum and give the product owner enough opportunities to adapt, since releases are usually 3 to 8 months in length. Therefore, if you are unable to come to a decision on sprint length, I would strongly recommend starting with a period of 2 weeks for software projects. The key thing to do is to find a balance between the Scrum principle of inspect and adapt and the development principle of building team momentum. Frozen sprint backlog. A crucial rule of Scrum is that the product owner cannot change items in the sprint backlog once the sprint has begun. This is a powerful rule when applied and assures that the team can focus on delivery for a period of time without having the goal post moved. It is also why selecting a sprint length is important to afford the product owner enough opportunities to adapt requirements when necessary. Maintaining this rule can often be one of the biggest challenges for the Scrum Master. This is usually because a product owner feels tempted to make changes immediately or has not noticed a requirement until the last minute. It is important for the Scrum Master to coach the product owner on the value of holding off changes for a sprint, as well as the destructive power of introducing changes before the end of a sprint. On the other hand, the team and product owner can usually negotiate a certain amount of change within a sprint. For example, spelling changes on a piece of copy are likely to be minimal impact. However, changing the look and feel of a website is likely to have a higher impact. Overall, this communication is healthy and fosters good relations between the Scrum team members, but the Scrum Master needs to make sure that these changes are as few or far between as possible and are only made if the team are comfortable delivering them. For Scrum Masters, handling these situations can involve liaising with the stakeholders as well as the product owner to make sure that there is no pressure exerted on the Scrum team. The team work on tasks. Before taking on tasks, the team should recap each story and its acceptance criteria, then speak to the product owner to clear up any inconsistencies and confirm their understanding. This is known as the principle of card, conversation, and confirmation, or the 3 C's. Following this, the team one by one take on each task in the sprint backlog. They collaborate to get all the tasks finished by the end of the sprint. The working of planning was done in the sprint planning meeting, which keeps the team focused on building features. It is, of course, possible that teams discover new tasks along the way, and they have the right to redesign or change tasks as they go along, but the aim is to get as close as possible to a solid design in the planning session. Scrum emphasizes the commitment made at sprint planning to deliver at the end of each sprint. The responsibility for this lies with the development team. The Scrum Master is on hand to remove impediments so that they can get the job done. Removing impediments. As we all know, life is not always predictable. For example, you may make good contingency plans for your journey to work, but traffic jams, late trains, or tripping over the cat on the way down the stairs, ouch, could use up all of your contingency time and make you late. Impediments are similar in nature. Some impediments are predictable and repeat themselves, such as product defects raised from the last sprint, routine meetings that cut the amount of work time, other teams asking for help from your team, etc. Other impediments are on-off events or less predictable, such as servers going down or long-term absenteeism. The Scrum Master's role is to remove, prevent, and assist with such impediments so that the team can continue working and reach their goal. The Scrum Master may need to suggest adding buffer time to the sprint so that less tasks are planned in. See my section on capacity-driven planning. Question and remove unimportant meetings. Speak to other Scrum Masters about going via him for help for his team. He may also need to meet with support departments to fix hardware or with team leads to source new team members. The key is to do the following. Number one, prioritize the issues by impact to the team. Number two, get them resolved as quickly as possible. Product backlog, grooming, and estimation. The original Scrum Guide states that during a sprint, Scrum teams should spend some time working with the product owner to groom the backlog. This is helpful because both the Scrum Master and development team usually have experiences that can aid the product owner in making well-informed feature and priority decisions. That is, a website development team may know ways to optimize the website search results. This may translate into a backlog item. In the same way, the Scrum Master may know of an upcoming dependency that affects the backlog priorities. In general, I recommend holding a time box meeting halfway through the sprint to discuss and estimate any newly added backlog stories. This results in shorter planning sessions and a well-informed Scrum team. I usually use this session as the route to an estimated release backlog. See my section on release planning. Another benefit of this time box is the ability for the team to help the product owner to break down large backlog items. Larger user stories are known as epics. The general rule of thumb is that a short story should always fit comfortably within a sprint. It is sometimes difficult for a product owner to judge when a story is too big, but the team can usually tell very quickly. Avoiding carryover. Other than coaching the Scrum team, the Scrum Master's main task is to aid the team in delivering all features in the sprint on time by removing any impediments. However, there are times when the size, timing, or complexity of an issue that is not resolved in time for the end of the sprint. Common examples are absent key members and critical days of sprint, downtime from a third party or hardware software, or major unforeseen bugs while building the software. These are examples of things that are very difficult for the Scrum Master to solve, as they rely on the knowledge or presence of another expert. In this case, sometimes the sprint goal can be met regardless of completing all technical tasks, but if the product owner is not convinced of this, items may need to be carried over into another sprint. I've always strived to avoid carryover and seen projects where it was completely avoided. Particularly, methods of avoidance on software development projects are applying techniques such as automated testing with a continuous build, mock objects in code, pair programming, code review, and other agile practices. Although these are outside the scope of this class, these practices are all common ways of creating a potentially shippable product and avoiding the risk of carryover. I would strongly recommend for Scrum Masters to coach teams on this. Team leads are also great and often very knowledgeable when it comes to assisting teams in implementing agile practices. The idea is to empower teams and avoid giving the impression that you are dictating how they build software. We do not want to cause frustration, but we do want to increase productivity. I have found that asking the question, given the results of our last sprint, what can we do differently to deliver a shippable product increment, usually helps in this situation. Finally, I would recommend focusing on the reasons for carryover and addressing them in every retrospective. As usual, the idea is to implement any solutions as soon as possible after the retrospective. Daily Scrum. Every day of sprint, the development team gets together in the same place to make their plan for the day. They stand to make sure that everyone subconsciously wants to wrap up the meeting as quickly as possible. To reach the daily plan, each team member answers the three questions. What did you do yesterday? What do you aim to do today? Do you have any impediments? The name of the game is communication. The first answer communicates progress. The second communicates the daily target, and the final answer gives the Scrum Master or anyone else a chance to help resolve the team's issues. It is important that only one person speaks at a time at the daily Scrum. That is to say that the Scrum Master asks the questions and only one team member will reply. It allows everyone in the room to focus on one update and take note of it. It often leads to a team member realizing that they can help or be helped by their colleague. Attendance of the product owner is a very powerful thing, and since many questions or impediments are often related to backlog items, it also allows the product owner to clear up confusion directly after the daily scrum. However, it is important that the product owner also remains silent since the meeting exists to enhance the team's productivity. The team also need to make the most of the 15 minutes and use it to discover any impediments and update the team on their progress. One important and often forgotten technique is to make sure that two key artifacts are visible in the daily scrum meeting. They are the sprint burn down chart and the sprint backlog in the form of a task board. The burn down allows the team to see the rate at which they are working and whether they are on track to deliver the sprint. A Scrum Master can use an off-track burn down to highlight impediments that could be holding the team up. The sprint backlog shows the stories and the tasks that the team are working on and make it very easy for everybody to make their plans for the day. The product owner can draw attention to the higher priority stories after the meeting, and the Scrum Master can advise on methods that will make the team more productive, such as wrapping up partially finished stories. The power of the daily scrum lies in the fact that it induces a very well coordinated development team who get their issues resolved quickly. It also breeds transparency between all Scrum team members. The sprint burn down. The sprint burn down is used to consistently measure the progress of the team in completing the sprint. It usually consists of a vertical axis which measures the number of tasks or hours of task remaining and a horizontal axis which measures the numbers of days remaining in the sprint. A diagonal line called a guideline demonstrates that the ideal rate at which the team should work in order to complete the sprint. It is based on the Agile principle of working at a consistent pace. In other words, in a 10-day sprint, if the team has 100 hours of work to do, they would work consistently at 10 hours of work per day. This allows the team to sustain the pace for the lifetime of the project. If they work in this manner, they do not get burnt out and can comfortably deliver on their commitments. In practice, teams usually work slightly above or below the guideline as the example shows, but we should strive to be as close to that line as possible. The example shows that the team is working very rapidly at the beginning of the sprint, but they then slow down and became pretty much on track. They then get slowed down towards day 4 for about 3 days. Finally, they get ahead of schedule again on day 7 before completing all the work in time for day 10. Typically, I find that teams form an arc on the burn down, ramping up at the beginning and dipping towards the middle of the sprint, but every team can vary. A Scrum Master should work with the team to assess the burn down daily and understand which impediments are causing the burn down to go off track, as well as what good things are causing it to be ahead of schedule. For the Scrum Master, removing any impediments is the focus. He can often help the team to do more of the good things and less of the things that take them off track. The team will quickly realize the importance of updating the time remaining on their task, since it will be reflected on the burn down. This boosts morale for tasks that complete on time and highlights early where the tasks are off schedule or need more support from the team. The key thing to take away from this section is that the sprint burn down helps the whole team to focus on timely delivery of the sprint and should be visible at the daily Scrum meetings. In my experience, the burn down is an artifact that is often left out of the process in industry, but its value should never be underestimated since it can bring an off-track team back on track and assist the Scrum Master in identifying impediments. Sprint review. At the end of a sprint, the team should have delivered a potentially shippable increment of the product. That means that they have built some of the features in the product backlog to such a high degree of quality that the product owner is happy to release them. At the sprint review, the stakeholders, product owner, and team gather for a demo to see what has been delivered and communicate around it. At times, I have found it useful for other teams to be invited to the sprint review. Examples of this are third-party partners or those that seek to learn from the outcome of the project. The sprint review is particularly important for the stakeholders since it is their opportunity to ask any questions of the team, and the product owner suggests new features or suggests changes to existing features. It is the role of the product owner to make note of these suggestions and the role of the Scrum Master to facilitate the dialogue and make sure the meeting runs to time. The Scrum Master, as meeting organizer, will usually arrange for any equipment that may be needed for the demo, such as TVs, projectors, cabling, tablets, and laptops. In general, anything to help the meeting flow smoothly. The product owner needs to be prepared to take notes of any suggestions that the stakeholders put forward during the meeting. As well as this, I recommend he or she bringing the stories from the sprint backlog to check against the demo. It is obviously important that a team is prepared with a plan on how they will demo their work. They should be familiar with the stories, acceptance criteria, the order they plan to demo, and who will be running the demo. The outcome of the meeting should be that all attendees have seen the outcome of the sprint. The features adhere to the acceptance criteria, and stakeholders should feel satisfied that they have had a chance to ask questions and make suggestions to the product owner. Potentially shippable increment. I have observed confusion over the phase potentially shippable increment of the product. Therefore, to be clear, the phrase means that the functionality is in a state that the product owner should be happy to release at any time. What it does not mean is that the product owner would want to put that functionality live at that time. For example, the team may have delivered just the home page of a website, which has no links to anything valuable, but the focus is around the standard of quality and the fact that it meets the requirements of the product owner to such an extent that it could be released to the public. Once other pages are built to this same standard, the product owner can quickly capitalize on the ROI. This demonstrates the beauty and value of the Scrum process. Sprint Retrospective. The Sprint Retrospective is a time box meeting which ties the Agile principle of inspect and adapt. In this meeting, the team focused on what worked in the sprint and what could be improved. I have observed different styles of running a retrospective, but my personal style is to keep it as close to the Scrum guide as possible and ask only two questions of the team. What worked during the last sprint? What could be improved in the next sprint? Each team member should speak one at a time so the rest of the team can hear clearly. The meeting needs to be time-boxed strictly as usual, but should be long enough to allow the team space to express themselves. This is an opportunity for everyone to be transparent. For example, if the amount of absenteeism in the sprint is a key blocker, nobody should feel negative about saying so. It may not be the fault of anyone in particular, and it may be an issue that the Scrum Master can help solve by arranging backfill for the team members quickly or being ready to replace long-term absentees, for example. The outcome of this meeting should be that the whole team have had a chance to reflect on the issues and suggest improvements. This adds value and helps them to deliver the product to a higher standard of quality. It also helps them to realize the positives and what they do, which boost team morale. In other words, not only should we say, if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it, we should also say, if it works, we'll keep doing it. As tempting as it is, the Scrum team need to avoid turning the meeting into a complain fest. I believe the minor details in Scrum make all the difference, and the purpose of asking, what could we improve, rather than what went badly, is that our focus is on rapid improvement. This way, we build the team up rather than depress them. Do not get me wrong. We all need to get our thoughts off our chest, and that is partially what this retrospective allows. However, I have found that the meeting is always more productive if we take a positive approach. In summary, the sprint retrospective works very well as the final piece of the sprint puzzle. It usually leaves everyone feeling that they have completed a piece of the project and have had an opportunity to suggest improvements. I strongly suggest that retrospective suggestions are put into practice as soon as possible after the meeting, since this demonstrates early progress and boosts the whole team. I can honestly say that retrospectives carried out correctly positively transform failing projects into successful ones on a sprint by sprint basis. This forms a crucial part of the Scrum factory, in essence, refining the quality of the process and product.